So if we consider these large horizontal cracks, next up we're going to be looking at how we can introduce some vertical cracks, or sort of some more micro cracks inside of these larger shapes. So we're just going to go ahead and repeat exactly the same bit of logic that we had before, only this time we're going to modify a couple of parameters. So you can see when we leave it by default, we're just going to some more of these kind of horizontal cracks. The smoothing that's being applied is sort of widening the other cracks in addition to adding new ones. So maybe I'll actually remove that smoothing. We'll just do one smoothing step at the end. And then with this, transform, what we're doing now at this time is, instead of stretching it vertically, we're actually going to compress it. So we can say 0.1 or even 0.01. And you're now going to see that we're going to get much more of a vertical bias to these cracks that are happening. And we can go ahead and increase the number. So we want to get more of these vertical cracks than we have the horizontal ones. And I'm probably going to go ahead and even make the vertical bias even stronger. So there we go. A very strong vertical bias now, giving us these nice kind of plates of rock with still very clear vertical cuts, horizontal cuts even, as well as these now new vertical ones. And we can go ahead and potentially even add more of these, so increase that count to 500. And possibly starting to look a little bit Voronoi-ish at this stage. So we can of course just try and increase the scale factor even more, although that doesn't seem to be having the effect that I would want it to. So let's just double check that that's stretching. Ah, yes, okay. Now that does explain it, because there is a certain point at which you can't compress something to be more flat, and that's what's happening here. So we're going to have to look at some other alternatives. So currently we're dealing with a uniform scale factor that's being applied everywhere on this surface. And that's not enough. So I think in order to really make this start to appear and look more organic, we're going to have to introduce a little bit of distortion before we apply the Voronoi fracture. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down a node called rest. And this is now going to store the position of the points before we do any distortion or fracturing. So currently we're compensating for the offset with this secondary transform. We can remove it. And we just have to put down a rest node again. Only this time, instead of store rest, we're going to set it to be extract rest. And you see this has the same result as before, except instead of explicitly untransforming it, we're just restoring the original positions again. And the advantage of this is that we can now do more manipulation to the position of the points than we were doing previously. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we put down an attrib noise node, we change the attrib noise node to influence P rather than the color, and then we bolt that on after the transform. We could plug it into the scatter or not, doesn't really make much difference. Let's actually go and have a look at this now so we can see the distorted position of the points. Well, right now it doesn't really look like much. It still looks like a bit of a pancake. So let's turn off the transform and let's just look at the noise by itself. If we go to this attrib noise, we can see the amplitude is quite low. That's just 1 meter. So let's increase it to 100. We just get this very, very distorted mess. So this isn't ideal either. We want to change the scale of the noise. So I'm going to set this to 0.01 or 0.01. Okay, maybe I'm going the wrong direction. So we're going to say 100. And there we go. We start to get some kind of interesting noisy distortions happening to the base terrain. And if we now look at the end results, we should be able to see that that distortion is being expressed via the Voronoi pattern. So if we turn off the attrib noise, we go back to a completely regular pattern. And if we turn back on the noise, the positional noise, we're going to get a less regular Voronoi pattern. And we could go ahead and increase the amplitude even further. We're going to end up with an even more distorted result. And this is going to start to hopefully, to my eye, it looks a lot more organic, hopefully to you as well. Only thing is that we're losing that vertical bias that we had before. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn that back on. And now we can see that we're getting a very clear vertical bias along these cliffs, but we've lost a lot of that sort of appearance that was feeling very regular Voronoi before, while still keeping our nice sort of clear horizontal cuts. Now it's up to you. You may want to go ahead and grab the attribute noise and go and modify our first result as well to use the rest position method. So we can grab that extract rest and go and have a look at this transform, turn it off, replace it by this rest. Let's just quickly put in another smooth so we can visualize those gaps a bit more clearly. There we go. And then we can also add that noise here to this sort of horizontal cutting. And this is maybe nice, maybe something you want to go for. I think it's a bit too intense for me, so I'm going to go ahead and bring the amplitude of that noise way down. But it's sort of an option that you have. You know, you can choose where you want to distort and by how much. You can choose as well to disable the offset in the X and the Y and only sort of offset the vertical noise shape that's going to introduce these kind of like wiggles. You can also just play around with only doing it in the X and the Y, which is maybe going to introduce some more of these kind of rings. So it's really kind of up to you, and there's a lot of sort of creative opportunity here to create different kinds of, to emulate different kinds of rock. So I think what I'm going to do is say I'm only going to offset the vertical ones, these big cuts vertically, and they're going to have a bigger sort of noise scale maybe, and then we can make the amplitude a bit higher, and this is going to allow us to create some sort of large, sort of more wiggly lines, for lack of a better term, where some of them are grouped close together and some of them further apart, and we can maybe add even. No, I think I'm going to tone it down a bit, err on the side of subtlety and leave it there. And then we can go ahead and look at our final result where we combine our horizontal cuts with these smaller vertical ones. And if we wanted to see these expressed a bit more clearly, we could plug this smooth back in, and we can see now that we have these bigger faults with the smaller cracks happening at the local scale. So yeah, altogether, not super unhappy with this at this stage. And we can move on to the next part, which is going to be sort of creating the volumes for the rocks out of these footprints.